I dipped my toe into the contingent water when I first set the business up. Reality is that
Yeah.
clock stops ticking the
Yeah.
second that you receive your final payday, and you're
True.
acutely aware, more aware than maybe what I thought I would be, of like,
Mm.
right, all I'm seeing now is the bank account going down.
Cost. Yeah.
Basically, all I'm seeing is cost.
Yeah.
So you've got to make some things happen quick.
I'm so excited to welcome to our global community today a wonderful founder who I have got to know extremely well through professional means, but also through the Women in Recruitment Leadership community. This is Natasha Klymczuk, and she founded her business Kelham Partners in 2025 and simultaneously launched her Speciality Sessions with a podcast for her leaders in her community. And during this really energetic episode, we are going to talk around her journey, why she launched her business, why every single person listening should be considering, if not already, selling retained solutions rather than the battle of contingency. And we also talk about the absolute gold dust of attending events, but what are her rules, what are her guidelines around attending events, and how do we ensure that there is a true return on investment? You're going to absolutely love this episode. Tasha's one of my faves, so let's jump in. This is Lysha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast, and I am so excited to welcome to our global community today somebody that I know, I think, on every level: personal, professional, fellow podcaster, member of my amazing Women in Recruitment Leadership community. And for anyone that has clicked on this link, someone who is really happy and open to share her experience of becoming a founder in very recent last year or so. So without further ado, let me introduce Natasha Klymczuk. And she is the founder of Kelham Partners and the amazing podcast host of Speciality Sessions. Welcome to you today, Tash. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome indeed. So I know who you are and what you do, but can you give us a really good sort of bio as to what your journey's been, first of all? Let's talk about how you've reached the point of, creating your own business, Kelham Partners.
Yeah, so as you know, I didn't start my life in recruitment. I don't know a load of recruiters, but the ones that I do, a lot of them came from being grads and have been recruiting for forever and a day. I started my life nursing, which didn't work out very quickly.
What sort of nursing did you do?
Adult general nursing.
Wow. You're an
Finished
angel.
well, I'm not, because I didn't stick at it. But I finished university. I actually left before qualifying in the final year, but that's another podcast topic. And by accident got a role within a personal care ingredient manufacturer in Leeds, going through a graduate recruitment scheme. Did that for a few years, working in the personal care sector, and I'd considered recruitment before, but never really seriously. I'd spoken to some high street agencies and just decided it wasn't for me, because I was working globally and a lot of those firms were looking at sort of like regional, at the time I was based in Leeds, just looking in a postcode, and decided it wasn't for me.
Can I just pause you there? So when you say you're working in that personal care industry, what were you doing? A sales role? What were
Yeah, sales role.
right,
Yeah.
okay.
So
Right, okay.
I started off as a rookie, and then I was looking after global accounts, and then I moved to another business. I was managing a commercial team, so sales,
Right.
admin, supply chain,
Okay.
admin. And then I got a call from a recruiter about another role that was from a boutique, and the job wasn't right. We did a screening call, and on both sides it wasn't the right fit. But I had a really good experience with this guy, who's also now a friend, Chris Binter, who works at Network Scientific.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, he was a researcher at the time. And, I said, look, I've considered recruitment before. Basically, have you got any jobs? He was like, oh, I don't know. So he spoke to one of the directors, and then 6 weeks later, it was, here's a phone, do some
So you
recruitment.
didn't really fall in, you kind of roly-polied in via a sales role. I like that.
Yeah, it was good. It's the best thing I've ever done. I think at the time, a year in, I was like, typical recruiter, isn't it? A year, 18 months in, you have some quick wins, then you have a lull, and you're like, have I done the right thing? But I think in hindsight, well, yeah, I've now set my own business up and I'm a lifer. I think I'll do this forever now.
But how can I just say, sliding door moment, had that call with him not been a great experience, then who knows? So I'm, let's have a big shout out to those who do a great job as being advocates, because that's wonderful that was your first experience. Well, your first experience with a niche recruiter, I suppose, rather than, like you say, the sort of the what we would call very disparagingly, sorry everyone who's in high street, but that's kind of what your experience was. So within 6 weeks you've started, and what like did you go straight into a 360 role? Like, what was your journey?
Yeah, I think so. I've always been a business developer at my core. So the plan was to bring me in, I think, to open doors. And then sort of work it out from there, really, was kind of the brief. I don't think there was really much of a plan. I don't think people really knew what to do with me, because I'd got a sales background, but obviously didn't really get the recruitment side. And it was very much like, we sell retainers, this is what we do. In hindsight, not everyone sold retainers, and it was a bit of the holy grail. But I was sort of never really told another way of doing it. So I just went out and sold retainers, and that was that. And then I worked out quite quickly that actually candidates are also business development opportunities at the same time. So filling my own roles. So ended up in a 360, but obviously with resourcing support, because there's only so much that you can do. So I think when I first started, I was probably working 50-50 retained and contingent. But that moved on quite quickly to 100% retained within a couple of years, just because I knew what I was doing, and I knew that I didn't want to just work contingently. And then worked in a really nice boutique for 6 years, had a great time doing that, and then obviously set my own business up in September last year.
September 2025. We definitely want to pin that and come back to the retained piece, because I think it's something that some people listening might think is still out of their reach, and I want to pin it and come back to it. So in terms of your journey, you launched in September 2025. So Kelham Partners was born. And what has been your kind of, I guess, MO in terms of niching into a market? What do you actually recruit for?
Yeah, so I've always worked in the chemical arena, so I've continued to do that.
Okay.
I want to build a business focused on that market. The chemical space, it sounds niche, but it's absolutely massive. And
Massive.
obviously have sub niches within that. So I'm not going to sit and rattle them all off, but there's personal care versus coating versus construction versus food and everything else in between. So there's obviously also the debate around knit to niche, not to niche, and all that stuff. But I think the business sits in a nice place where it would allow, as the business grows, for consultants to niche down further. I think as a business as a whole, if we were just focusing in personal care ingredients, for example, what happens then if the market tips?
Absolutely. We've all everyone listening, if you've been in recruitment before 2019, we saw that happen in COVID. There were a number of markets that crashed. And as we record this now in 2026, sad to say, there are 2 or 3 significant sectors that are crashing. So I'm just going to put my opinion out there, and then I guess you can all decide as you're listening, and I'm sure Natasha can give her 2 penny. I think niche doesn't need to mean that you put all your eggs in one basket. Right. I think niche means that you create something valuable from a talent pool, from benchmarking perspective, from competitor analysis, and being able to position it from a candidate's perspective. I've always said, from my point of view, I'm niche because I only place very experienced recruitment fee earners within the Northwest. Now that sounds quite niche, but actually I recruit across every industry.
Yeah.
So it really isn't actually that niche. So I love your industry, and you're obviously really immersed in it. Oh no, I hope not literally. I know you do. So just to be clear, let's unpin now retained.
Yeah.
Are you just doing retained, or are you doing any contingent?
Yeah, no, I'm doing retained work. So I dipped my toe into the contingent water when I first set the business up, because you leave your permanent employment. I'm being very honest. You leave your salary. You've got, hopefully you've planned your own finances for however long you've got a runway for. The reality is that clock stops ticking the second that you receive your final payday, and you're acutely aware, more aware than maybe what I thought I would be, of like, right, all I'm seeing now is the bank account going down, basically. All I'm seeing is cost. So you've got to make some things happen quick. Now, I was really lucky. I won a retainer within the first month. So that's, good going. But I wasn't working up to full capacity. Of course I wasn't. So I went to an exhibition in Germany, spoke to lots of people, ended up picking up a contingent role. And in fairness to that company, they've been burnt with retained recruiters. And totally get it. They had got candidates in process, ordinarily just not a role I would have looked at, but I knew somebody who could have been, good for the job. So I contacted this one guy, said, could you be interested? Yes, I could, put them in, went through the recruitment process. Great. Got to final stage interview and, still waiting for feedback. And it's, a month later.
That's frustrating.
Yeah, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. And I guess with, there will still be people listening that maybe haven't either tried to sell a retained solution or think, well, I just place, or not just, but I place accountants, or I place, recruiters, or I place, salespeople. So there seems to be this sort of misconception that retained is only for a certain level, but I don't agree with that at all. It's about creating commitment, isn't it? So what would you say to that bracket of people that are listening that think it's out of their reach?
Yeah, I think my concern was when I set up on my own, you are just one person. And even though
Yep.
I've always worked for boutiques, the largest headcount previously was we got up to 6 heads. So, not huge, but there's still other resource around, right? What would make somebody be willing to completely commit to me as an individual? I know I can do the job, but it's a different sell, right? You're having to relearn everything about how you presented yourself. You're now finding your own voice and your own way of doing things. So working on my own, I do need that commitment, because if I work on this, I can't work on something else. And people do get that. It's just on a fundamental, like, human level, got to make things add up and be worth spending your time on. But also, if something's business critical, they want somebody to actively spend time on this with commitment. And, in my market, and I can't speak for others, things don't move really quickly. It's quite a conservative market. So
Right.
we need to deliver shortlists. Generally speaking, I'd like to do it in 4, sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 8 weeks, depending on seniority, number of people, funnel, interest level, and all that stuff. You need to cover the time and you need the space to be able to do that. And if there's 4 or 5 recruiters working on it, you're just not able to do it. And if your client wants representing appropriately for a role that's viewed as maybe strategic or with a level of risk, because that would be the reason why they'd come to you, because if it was easy and they could fill it themselves, they wouldn't be having that conversation.
But they wouldn't be outsourcing it, would they? No, of course they wouldn't.
It needs to work both ways, and I think most people are quite comfortable with that. And if they're not, then it's okay and it's not the right time. But if that change has come back to me, and over the years there's been lots of times where people have gone, we're not ready to retain, fine, but then they've come back 4 or 5 weeks later, and that's fine as well, so
Of course it is. Well, even as you're saying it, whenever I speak to any sort of founder or business owner that has got the retained model universal, and that's just the way you do it, it just sounds calmer. It just sounds much more partnership led, as opposed to the frenzy, which I've always thought is the biggest irony of rec to rec, is why we do things differently at Key Recruitment. So we're not in the frenzy with everyone else. Like, why would you go and do that? Like, you can't imagine engaging with a solicitor or an accountant without knowing that that's the upfront cost. So I love the way that you position it. Can we just bring something back in that you just alluded to? And I don't want it to have been something that we brush over, that you very quickly went and positioned yourself physically in an event. So basically, it was a specific sector event for you to be able to network, presumably, and it was an exhibition. So what do you think the benefit of doing that is? Because I imagine that's not a cheap thing to do. So from an investment and ROI perspective, I mean, it might be a long-term thing, but what would your advice be to people listening that are thinking, well, we need to get to San Francisco, we need to get to Berlin, or we need to get to Tel Aviv, depending on where your market is. What would you say the considerations should be on relating it to an investment ROI?
Prep. Do the prep properly. Like, the amount of times that you and you have to learn this the hard way. Early days, just tip up to a show and start chatting to people, and you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know if you're talking to the right people. You get brushed off stands, and it's all just a little bit uncomfortable and just not very nice. Whereas actually, if you're messaging people and making arrangements to meet, even if it's not fixed time, sometimes it's impossible, at least people know you're coming. So that's just a much nicer experience, whether it's speaking to them as candidates, as clients, just as networking, and then you can take those relationships forward. And I've been doing the rounds at shows for a long time, for years and years and years. It'd be pre-recruitment. So by the time they see you the 3rd time, the 4th time, the 5th time at the same event, they're like, you're back,
Yeah. But it's familiarity, isn't it? And it means that you can go and get something valuable out of it. I mean, it's interesting with considering people who are neurodiverse, where they shouldn't miss out on, and we shouldn't miss out on, no one should miss out on any opportunity to, be able to go to events. But I guess it can be quite daunting for people if they think, oh my God, I'm gonna have to walk into this room with thousands of delegates, whatever. But what you've just said there is actually so simple. It's, a way to effectively know whether it is worth your time going. And you can just make, whether, like you say, whether it's something firm, like let's meet at this time. We know that there's going to be a coffee shop, because you get the itinerary usually, don't you? Or do you want to go to this seminar with me?
Yeah.
I think it's just a much more, again, to use the word calmer way to maximize what could potentially be very beneficial when you go to one of these exhibitions. And that's from someone that you're clearly an expert at it. So thanks for that.
And do you know what? It's fun. It's just really nice to get out, talk to people. You also get a bit of a tone of what's going on. I'll not bore you too much with it, but like the European chemicals market at the minute, it's in a really, really difficult place. Like the general tone of the market is not optimistic. So people have been like, I can't believe you set a business up in this market, but I think that's a whole story, and I think it separates the wheat from the chaff. But we'll go.
Now's the time to do it. The reality is, like you say, because chemicals is used in every single process, from what I understand, in terms of manufacture and keeping our world moving. It's not going to disappear overnight. If it's challenging, I imagine that's down to production costs and logistics and tariffs,
regulations and things like that.
Regulations,
it's
well, you as a recruiter within that, you become the expert, don't you? And you become that go-to person. So I think it's brilliant. That's a totally different podcast conversation of setting up in a challenging market. Now's the time to do it.
And also I think, like I say, you get to know the tone, you get to actually physically feel the tone of the room. And,
you do.
There are shows that I go to every year consistently because I know it's good football, I know there's the right people to speak to. But if it's a new show and you send some messages out and you think, okay, maybe the right people aren't here for this one, you just don't go. So doing the prep allows you to just work out whether that cost is the right cost. And then also the opportunity to ask other people, what shows do you go to? And then broaden it out from there. But when I'm running at full capacity, I go to probably 6-8 shows a year globally.
That's good.
You could go to one every month if you wanted to, but you've obviously got to do your day job.
Well, absolutely. You've got to do your day job. But I think, even to go once a quarter, even biannually, I've always been very present at events. That's even before my rec career. I worked in the advertising world, and I used to make sure I always attended, whether it was award ceremonies, whatever the function would be. You just make a comment there. If actually you're going through a very challenging market, it's probably never been more important to get out and spend time with those decision makers to create a safe space for them. Because trust me, when you've got your customers sharing their vulnerability with you, which is, you can go and do over a coffee if you're in Frankfurt, or even if you're in Blackpool, doesn't matter where your event's based, you will get a lot closer and build a better partnership if you've done that and taken time to do that. I absolutely love the recruitment events, and a lot of people are quite disparaging about them, but I've had some such deep and meaningful conversations. In fact, last year at the expo, I managed to miss one of the speakers, like the main speakers. I don't think it was Greg Savage. I don't think I'd ever met him, but it was one of the main speakers, because I was so embroiled in this like deep and meaningful conversation with about 3 other business owners. We'd gone and had a coffee and we just lost track of time. That was priceless. You could never have done that any other time. So I'm really glad that you flippantly said about exhibitions, but I think they are, compared to the sort of money that people maybe get distracted with in terms of what AI and automation or what marketing, whatever, actually, for me, that's getting you in front of your customer only if you've done the research. So I think that.
Yeah, if you've done the research, and also like AI is great. You know me, I'm a big fan. I think anything that can make particularly admin a lot easier, then why we do it. But in terms of like client and candidate outreach or like content writing, I think it can be good to generate ideas, but why are we using it to do it solely? Because one, it's obvious, and two, it's just so impersonal. So standing there in front of your potential client or candidate or whoever, there's nowhere to hide, and I quite like that.
And there's no replacement for it. There's with all the amazing tools that we have, unless we at some point in the future have an avatar, which that's just what we're going to be doing instead, sitting eating potato crisps or something. I don't know. No, that's really crazy. So tell us about your podcast, because that was very much part of your launch plan. So it's Speciality Sessions. So who do you have on, and then what's been your intention with it?
I'll be honest, setting the business up and launching a podcast all in the first 90 days. And when I say launching, I mean I'd recorded the first full season and I didn't have a guest to start with. So
Amazing.
one would argue maybe it was a bit off maybe could you. Um, but no, I'm joking aside. I'm so glad I've done it. It's something I thought about a few years ago and the timing wasn't right. And and that was that. But when I set the business up, I thought, no, let's just do it and see what happens. Worst case scenario, no one agrees to it and we just
No
don't.
one listens.
No one
Yep.
listens. It'll all be fine. Middle case scenario, we do one season, but I can't find any more guests.
Yep.
And I have one season and it's evergreen, it sits there forever. Or best case scenario, it does quite well and people actually want to be on it.
Yeah.
The latter's happened, which is great. So I'm having, well, the first season is all leaders within my space. And that is, I'm quite keen to show a spectrum, not just the startups, not just the big guys, but everything in between. So I've had, the CEO of one of the biggest distributors in the industry come on. And then I've also had another guy who's managing a 40 million turnover site in the UK and everything in between. Few episodes have come out. The recording takes the schedule right up until April because I'm releasing them
Amazing.
fortnightly.
Good.
But it's very focused around people. It's not a recruitment hire push. It's not for them to push products or services. It's about having conversations with them about the market, how they moved into the sector, and also, what they want to get out of doing the podcast as well, because that's important. You want it to
Definitely.
for them, especially when, I called this, well, I managed to speak to the CEO of a business that I really admire. I was 3 weeks into launching the business and I was like, would you like to come on my podcast that doesn't exist yet? And he was like, do you know what? Yeah. And I was really honest I was asking more of the guests than maybe what I could give
Good offer.
them. And I think that was the best route rather than trying to fluff something and say, I'm the biggest and best recruiter in the chemical space. It just doesn't work. But people have been really generous and really kind with the time.
Good.
And actually now people are contacting me to come on it, which
I
didn't
love that.
think
You've already done it in your first season. That's amazing.
yeah.
Honestly, I mean, obviously I'm 6 seasons in and
Mm.
everything that you have as your intention is still my intention, which is creating a space for people that maybe haven't been on podcasts before.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
very often leaders, we have our own imposter syndrome about certain things. Not everyone's as bullshit as me and happy to talk to anybody about anything on the show. But I think it's really great opportunity, and the fact that you've already got people coming to you asking to come on, and you've done it all with that true intention, which is to educate your listeners. You're not trying to do it. I get loads of messages going, oh, how did you get the sponsorship with Patreon? How did you get, and it's like, that wasn't my intention.
Yeah.
That's people that, we ultimately are, our clients are the same, it's the same pool of people, and it's actually products that we use, and services that we use. I would never advocate doing that ever again, which I have done in the past. Don't take sponsorship just for the sake of it, but don't make that your intention.
No.
I think have a really genuine, like when you're doing anything, whether it's you're listening as a recruiter and you're building out a desk, whether you're about to go and launch on your own, whether you're thinking about launching on your own, your intention should never really be about the financial gain. It should be around the purpose and the values. And I love that that's stayed true to you. So will you take it live? Will you do a live show, do you think?
It's a work in
Is it
progress.
feasible?
It's work in progress, but let's put it that way. But I think
exciting.
I think as long as you're honest about your intentions with people, I don't think you can go far wrong. And I'm having really interesting conversations with people in the sector, and I genuinely believe other people should hear a version of that. But then on the other side, I'm a new business, and let's be honest, it's a good marketing activity, right?
Of course it is.
And I'm never going to shy away from that. So,
No.
and the podcast has meant that I've spoken to really interesting people who I don't think I probably would have
got to speak to.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you get to know things about your industry. I mean, I remember going to again, it was a good couple of years ago. I went to an expo, and I can only ever manage 2 or 3 seminars in a day because otherwise my brain is just too wired from then speaking to everybody. And this sounds very disingenuous, but everything that they were talking about, I'd already covered in all my podcasts, one way or another. So you become, as a recruiter, you become a font of knowledge. You've got all these insights that you can share. And let's face it, let's say you have got a candidate that you've positioned to one of the guests that you've had on in the past. What better way to send PR material on before you have your interview with this person? Go and have a listen to the podcast they did with me. I mean, I have been doing that with intention.
Yeah.
But that I think it's about having that at the core, that you're educating yourself. Like, there's not going to be many other niche specialists in your market that have got an agnostic view where you're listening to people and you're genuinely interested in their conversations. Before we finish, what would you say to Natasha of a year ago before she launched? Is there any, because what I want here is there anything you'd have done differently in terms of launch that you can impart to people listening that are maybe thinking of setting up on their own?
Would I have done anything differently? No, I don't think I would. I don't think I'd have done the process differently, because I really thought it out. I thought it out. I spoke to you about it. But what I would say is I probably did overthink it a little bit. When I actually, it's actually quite funny now when I think about it. I had like a 20-page business plan with 5-year projections. I was getting from September to Christmas. Like, you can't ever lose sight of what you want something to look like.
Yeah.
But the reality is, I think you have to take it in chunks of time. And yes, all right, you're working towards a bigger vision. And I'm very good at the blue sky, not always as good at the execution. So you've got to get more in the detail, and maybe that's not my comfort zone necessarily.
But you've almost had to become that person. Otherwise, you might miss out big chunks. I always relate it to fitness, or whether it's sport fitness, whatever people do to stay healthy, as healthy as they can. That's like me saying today, I'm going to run the marathon next year. That's crazy. But if I said I'm going to go couch to 5K, let's go, how can I get to 1K? You would do it. And that just sounds sensible. It sounds normal. But here's us going, yes, in 5 years, I want to be at 5 million EBITDA and have 10 people working with it. It's like, why would you do that? But you need to have a vision. You also want to have this vision. So I think it's having a combination of both. Well, I obviously, on behalf of the podcast, we wish you all the best with it. And we can't wait to see what you continue to do in terms of, shining a light on your very interesting sector. And, really, for me, if we could do Control-Alt-Delete on the recruitment industry, we'd all be working retained. Nobody would be working contingency, would we?
No, I agree. I think it's a confidence thing and a timing thing, and maybe if we all just start doing it, then maybe we'll just start turning the wheel a bit,
turning the dial on what people perceive from an external perspective. And gosh, that's always been one of my intentions as a recruiter, to change people's perception of recruitment. So thank you for helping us do that, Natasha, and I appreciate you joining us on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast.
Thanks for having me.